The Arado R-234 Blitz emerged from the increasingly desperate strategic situation faced by Nazi Germany during the later stages of the Second World War. By 1940 and 1941, the Luftwaffe had already begun to lose the technological edge it had enjoyed in the early campaigns over Poland, France, and the Low Countries. The rapid pace of Allied aircraft development, especially in the field of long-range bombers, made it clear that Germany needed to innovate radically if it were to maintain any form of aerial superiority. The Reichsluftfahrtministerium, RLM, Germany's air ministry, saw in jet propulsion the potential for a revolutionary step forward in bomber and reconnaissance aviation. Arado Flugzeugwerke, a company better known for seaplanes and training aircraft before the war, was given the task of designing the world's first jet-powered bomber. Under the leadership of chief designer Walter Blum, Arado sought to capitalize on new jet engine technology being developed by Junkers and BMW. The aircraft that resulted, designated R-234, was envisioned as a fast, uncatchable bomber capable of outrunning any Allied fighter and delivering precision strikes against strategic targets. The name Blitz, meaning lightning, reflected this concept of speed as the ultimate defense. The initial challenge was the lack of sufficiently powerful and reliable jet engines. Early German turbojets, such as the Junkers Jumo 004, were still experimental, prone to short service lives and frequent mechanical failures. The Arado team designed the aircraft around these limitations, keeping the fuselage as narrow and aerodynamic as possible while mounting engines in pods beneath the wings. This streamlined arrangement gave the R-234 a clean profile that emphasized efficiency and high-speed flight. Another major design breakthrough was in its landing gear. To save weight and maximize internal fuel capacity, the first prototypes did not have conventional retractable landing gear. Instead, they employed a jettisonable, three-wheeled takeoff trolley and retractable landing skids. Once airborne, the trolley would be dropped and the aircraft would land on the skids, which retracted into the fuselage when not in use. While innovative, this system caused significant operational difficulties, particularly on rough airfields, and it was eventually replaced in later variants with a conventional tricycle undercarriage. The cockpit layout was also revolutionary. The R-234 featured a glazed nose with the pilot seated in a pressurized cabin that offered superb visibility, essential for high-speed bombing and reconnaissance missions. With the Blitz intended to be flown by a single pilot, Arado engineers had to simplify flight and bombing operations, introducing advanced autopilot systems and bomb sights. The result was one of the most modern cockpits of the war, albeit one that placed immense workload and responsibility on the pilot. By the time the R-234's design had taken shape in 1942, Germany's strategic position had deteriorated. The Luftwaffe was increasingly on the defensive, and Allied bombing campaigns were crippling German industry. The pressure on Arado to deliver a working prototype quickly was immense, yet despite resource shortages, Allied air raids, and the inherent difficulties of pioneering jet bomber design, the R-234 project moved forward. In concept, the Blitz was not just a bomber, it was also conceived as a high-speed reconnaissance aircraft, capable of photographing enemy positions and retreating before Allied fighters could intercept it. This dual-purpose vision reflected both Germany's strategic desperation and the recognition that jet propulsion offered a chance to leapfrog Allied advances. The origins of the R-234 thus lay in a fusion of necessity and innovation, an aircraft designed to restore the Luftwaffe's ability to project power while simultaneously pioneering a new era in aviation. The R-234 Blitz was born not in an environment of luxury or experimentation, but in the crucible of defeat, as Germany scrambled for technological miracles. It would go on to become the world's first operational jet bomber and one of the most advanced aircraft of the Second World War, even if it arrived too late and in too few numbers to alter the course of the conflict. Its origins remain a testament to the extraordinary technological leaps driven by desperation in wartime. The prototype and testing phase of the Arado R-234 began in earnest in late 1942, when the first airframes were completed and prepared for flight trials. The initial version, designated R-234V1, took to the skies on the 30th of July 1943 at Rheine Airfield. powered by a pair of Junkers Jumo 004B turbojet engines. Test pilot Flugkapitän Selle reported that the aircraft displayed excellent handling and stability, though engine reliability remained a significant concern. The Jumo 004 engines, while groundbreaking, suffered from a service life of barely 25 flight hours, and they were prone to compressor failures and overheating under prolonged strain. These problems plagued every early flight test and underscored the immaturity of jet technology at the time. The unconventional landing system also presented difficulties. The takeoff trolley, though functional, required precise handling, and the recovery skids made landings hazardous on anything but smooth, well-prepared airstrips. On several occasions during testing, trolleys bounced back and struck the aircraft after release, and rough landings damaged skids and lower fuselage sections. Although these issues did not render the concept unworkable, they convinced the RLM and Arado's engineers that a more conventional landing gear arrangement would be necessary for operational use. Later prototypes introduced a tricycle undercarriage, which greatly simplified handling and made the aircraft more suitable for frontline deployment. Performance results, however, were remarkable. Even with the unreliable engines, the R-234 prototypes demonstrated speeds exceeding 660 kilometers per hour, 410 miles per hour, faster than almost any Allied fighter in service at the time. The aircraft climbed rapidly, was highly responsive, and proved exceptionally difficult to intercept. The clean aerodynamic design paid off, with test flights confirming that the Blitz could easily outrun enemy aircraft and cruise at altitudes above 9,000 meters, 30,000 feet. These qualities made it especially well-suited for the reconnaissance role, where survival depended on speed and altitude rather than defensive armament. The testing program also validated the aircraft's potential as a precision bomber. Bomb racks installed under the fuselage and wings allowed the R-234 to carry up to 1,500 kilograms of ordnance, including high-explosive and fragmentation bombs. Trials with the Lotfe 7K bomb sight and autopilot systems demonstrated that the jet bomber could release its payload with accuracy comparable to that of conventional bombers, but at speeds that made interception almost impossible. This combination of speed and precision distinguished the R-234 as a genuinely revolutionary weapon. Despite these successes, delays were constant. Allied bombing raids against German industry repeatedly disrupted production of both the airframe and the Jumo 004 engines. Materials shortages forced Arado engineers to improvise with substitutes, often reducing reliability. Additionally, the Luftwaffe's shifting priorities meant that the R-234 program competed for resources with other advanced projects, including the Messerschmitt Me 262 fighter. As a result, prototype testing continued into 1944, even as Germany's strategic position deteriorated. By mid-1944, further prototypes such as the R-234, V7 and V9 introduced the definitive tricycle landing gear and additional refinements, setting the pattern for the operational B-series. These aircraft combined the speed and agility proven in earlier flights with the practicality required for combat service. The transition from experimental prototypes to pre-production models was rapid, as the Luftwaffe pressed for deployment of the Blitz as both a reconnaissance aircraft and a fast bomber. In the end, the testing phase confirmed that the R-234 was one of the most advanced aircraft of its time. It had exceeded expectations in speed and handling, while its limitations lay largely in the immaturity of German jet engine technology and the constraints of wartime production. From the first flights in 1943 to the rollout of the B-series in 1944, the Blitz emerged from its prototype stage not as a theoretical experiment, but as a practical weapon system ready to enter combat, the world's first operational jet bomber. The Arado R-234 entered operational service in the summer of 1944, a moment when Germany's strategic situation had already begun to collapse under the weight of Allied advances. Despite this, the Luftwaffe moved quickly to field the jet in specialized units, initially prioritizing the reconnaissance role. The first squadron to receive the aircraft was Sonderkommando Götz, named after its commander, which operated a small number of R-234s equipped with cameras instead of bomb racks. These aircraft undertook high-speed, high-altitude reconnaissance missions over Allied lines in France and the Low Countries, beginning shortly after the Allied landings in Normandy. Their speed and altitude rendered them effectively untouchable by Allied fighters, which were unable to intercept them during the critical months of summer 1944. Reports from these first missions were striking. R-234S provided detailed photographs of Allied troop movements, supply depots, and airfields, often penetrating deep into enemy-held territory with complete impunity. Commanders praised the unprecedented quality and timeliness of intelligence returned by the Blitz, which arrived far faster than information gathered by conventional reconnaissance aircraft. Allied forces quickly noticed the presence of a new German jet, but could do little to counter it. In effect, the R-234 gave the Luftwaffe its last true aerial advantage of the war, though the small numbers available limited its overall impact. By late 1944, bomber-configured R-234B2S began to enter service with Kampfgeschwader 76, KG-76, making the Blitz the first jet aircraft in history to conduct bombing missions. The unit's early operations were cautious, focusing on precision strikes against Allied bridges, supply centers, and tactical targets. Pilots noted that the speed of the aircraft allowed them to release bombs and escape before flak or fighters could effectively respond. During one of the most notable missions in December 1944, R-234S were used to attack Allied positions during the Ardennes offensive. They struck bridges across the Meuse River in an attempt to slow the Allied advance. Although the raids caused limited structural damage due to the small bomb loads, they demonstrated the concept of a jet-powered bomber on the battlefield. Reactions among pilots were mixed. Many were impressed by the aircraft's speed, which allowed them to evade Allied fighters with ease. However, they also criticized the heavy workload placed on a single pilot, who had to manage navigation, bomb aiming, and aircraft control simultaneously. The advanced autopilot and bomb sight systems were helpful but not flawless, and accurate bombing at high speeds demanded skill and concentration. Moreover, engine reliability issues continued to plague operations, with frequent breakdowns and short service lives limiting sortie rates. The Luftwaffe leadership regarded the R-234 as both a technological triumph and a logistical headache. In theory, it offered a means of striking back at the Allies with unprecedented speed. In practice, the limited number of aircraft available and the constant maintenance problems prevented large-scale deployment. By late 1944, only a handful of operational squadrons were flying the jet, and they often had fewer than a dozen serviceable aircraft at any given time. Nevertheless, the entry of the R-234 into combat marked a milestone in aviation history, proving that jet-powered bombers were not only feasible, but could be deployed effectively in real combat conditions. Allied intelligence quickly recognized the significance of the Blitz. Reports from captured German pilots and aerial photographs confirmed the presence of a new type of jet bomber. However, its limited production run meant that the Allies did not consider it a decisive threat. Still, encounters with the R-234 impressed Allied airmen, who noted its speed and sleek profile as unlike anything else in the sky. For the Luftwaffe, the aircraft's arrival came too late to change the course of the war, but it represented a glimpse of the future. By the end of 1944, the R-234 had moved from experimental flights to frontline operations, carving out a niche as both a reconnaissance platform and a precision bomber. Its performance left a strong impression on those who flew it and those who faced it, establishing it as one of the most advanced aircraft of the conflict. Yet its early operational use also revealed the challenges of pioneering jet technology under the pressures of a collapsing war effort, challenges that would define the rest of its short combat career. As the Arado R-234 moved into broader operational use in early 1945, its combat employment revealed both the promise of jet-powered bombing and the severe limitations imposed by Germany's strategic collapse. The aircraft's reconnaissance missions remained its most successful contribution, flying at speeds over 700 kilometers per hour and altitudes exceeding 9,000 meters. R-234S could penetrate deep into Allied-controlled territory with near impunity. They provided valuable intelligence on troop movements and logistical networks, photographing the bridgeheads, fuel depots, and marshalling yards that sustained the Allied advance. Allied pilots frequently reported the presence of lone, fast-flying German jets, but were unable to intercept them effectively, underscoring the Blitz's advantage in this role. Its combat role as a bomber, however, produced mixed results. Kampfgeschwader 76 employed the R-234 during the Ardennes offensive in December 1944, targeting bridges across the Meuse and other vital choke points. Although the aircraft reached its objectives, bomb loads of 500 to 1,000 kilograms were too small to destroy heavily reinforced structures. The speed of attack made flak largely ineffective, but precision was difficult to achieve at such velocities, and the overall effect of the raids was limited. Even so, the very fact that jet bombers could strike and escape unscathed impressed both Luftwaffe leadership and Allied observers. One of the most significant missions took place in March 1945 when R-234S conducted raids against the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen. The bridge, captured intact by U.S. forces, was a critical crossing over the Rhine, and its destruction became a priority for the Luftwaffe. R-234 bombers attacked repeatedly, often in daylight, attempting to drop heavy ordnance directly onto the structure. Despite their speed and the accuracy of advanced bomb sights, the bridge proved remarkably resilient, surviving multiple raids until structural collapse finally occurred due to accumulated damage and strain. These attacks showcased both the potential of jet bombing and the limitations imposed by payload capacity and Germany's inability to coordinate large-scale strikes. The R-234 also saw limited use in a ground attack role. Equipped with bombs under the wings, some aircraft conducted hit-and-run raids against Allied supply columns and airfields. Their speed allowed them to evade interception, but the small numbers available meant such missions were little more than harassment. Tactical deployment of the Blitz could not alter battlefield outcomes in the face of overwhelming Allied superiority. Defensive shortcomings became more evident as the Allies advanced. The AR-234 lacked any defensive armament, relying entirely on speed to survive. While this usually worked, Allied fighters, particularly the P-51 Mustang, occasionally managed to engage R-234S during vulnerable phases of flight, such as takeoff or landing. In these moments, the jet's advantage evaporated and losses occurred. Maintenance issues also reduced operational availability, with engines requiring frequent replacement and spare parts becoming increasingly scarce in Germany's collapsing industrial base. Despite these obstacles, pilots respected the aircraft's performance. Many regarded it as remarkably stable at high speeds, with excellent handling and a degree of protection simply through its ability to outrun opponents. Luftwaffe commanders, however, lamented its late arrival and limited production numbers. By 1945, fewer than 300 or 234S had been built, and only a fraction were operational at any given time. The aircraft could not be fielded in the numbers necessary to influence the broader air war, and it became another example of a wonder weapon deployed too late to affect Germany's fate. Nevertheless, the combat use of the Arado R-234 demonstrated the dawn of a new era in warfare. It was the first bomber that could credibly escape interception by propeller-driven fighters, the first to combine jet propulsion with reconnaissance and bombing, and the first to show how speed could replace defensive armament as a means of survival. In practice, its limited numbers and Germany's strategic collapse meant its missions achieved little beyond isolated tactical effects. Yet its operational record revealed the path forward for post-war bomber design, where speed and altitude would dominate considerations of survivability. The Blitz thus served as both a glimpse of the future and a symbol of the Luftwaffe's last attempt to regain technological superiority in the final months of the war. Variants of the Arado R-234 reflected both the rapid pace of its development and the Luftwaffe's shifting needs in the final stages of the war. From the earliest prototypes to specialized reconnaissance and bomber versions, the Blitz evolved into multiple configurations, each designed to extract maximum value from limited resources and experimental jet technology. Though production numbers remained small, the variety of adaptations revealed both the versatility of the design and the constraints of Germany's crumbling industrial base. The first group of prototypes, designated R-234 V1 through V5, were built with the distinctive jettisonable trolley and landing skid system. These early models were primarily used for testing and high-speed reconnaissance trials. While they demonstrated the aircraft's exceptional performance, the impracticality of the skid system became apparent. Recovery difficulties, damage during landings, and reliance on specialized ground equipment convinced engineers to adopt a more conventional tricycle landing gear. This change was introduced with the R234 V6 and subsequent prototypes, setting the pattern for all operational versions. The first operational production series was the R234B, built in several subvariants. The B-1 served as a dedicated reconnaissance aircraft equipped with RB-50/30ths and RB-75/30ths cameras mounted in the fuselage. These aircraft flew some of the most effective Luftwaffe reconnaissance missions of the war, providing high-resolution imagery of Allied positions at speeds beyond interception. The B-2 was configured as a bomber, capable of carrying up to 1,500 kilograms of bombs under the fuselage and wings. This was the version most often used in combat with KG-76, conducting strikes during the Ardennes offensive and later against the Remagen Bridge. The B-series also introduced autopilot systems and the advanced Lotfe 7K bomb sight to help pilots manage bombing tasks at high speeds. Specialized bomber modifications included the R234 B2/N Nachtbomber, designed for night operations, and the R234 B2/N Nachtjäger, an experimental night fighter variant. The latter was fitted with Fuji 218 Neptune radar and a pair of MG 151 cannons, along with a second crew member for radar operation. While trials were conducted, the aircraft's performance as a night fighter was hampered by engine limitations and the difficulty of integrating radar into a high-speed platform. Only a handful were built, and they saw little, if any, combat use. Further development led to the R234C series, which was designed to address the power and reliability problems of the Jumo 004 engines. The C model replaced the twin engines with 4 BMW 003 turbojets mounted in pairs under each wing. This configuration provided more thrust, better takeoff performance, and improved reliability, while also increasing top speed to over 870 kilometers per hour, 540 miles per hour. The C-1 was intended as a bomber, while the C-3 was planned as a multi-role version capable of reconnaissance and ground attack. Production of the C-series began in 1945, but only a few were completed before Germany's surrender. Planned variants that never reached operational status included the R234D with further engine upgrades, the R234P as a night fighter with advanced radar, and the R234R, a long-range reconnaissance model. These projects remained on paper or in prototype stages, casualties of Germany's deteriorating war effort and the Allied bombing campaign that devastated industrial capacity. In total, approximately 280 R234S were built, the majority being B-series aircraft. While this number was far too small to influence the outcome of the war, the range of variants demonstrated the Luftwaffe's intent to exploit the aircraft across multiple roles. From reconnaissance to bombing, night fighting to advanced prototypes, the R234 program illustrated both the ingenuity of German engineers and the impossibility of sustaining complex weapons production under relentless Allied pressure. Ultimately, the R234's variants represented an ambitious but fragmented attempt to harness jet technology in its earliest stage. Each version showed glimpses of potential, but none were produced in sufficient numbers to change the course of the conflict. Still, the Blitz provided a valuable template for post-war development, inspiring Allied designers to pursue jet-powered bombers and reconnaissance aircraft with the lessons learned from Germany's pioneering but ultimately overstretched effort. The global impact and legacy of the Arado R234 Blitz are best understood in terms of its pioneering status. Although it entered service too late and in too few numbers to alter the outcome of the Second World War, it was the world's first operational jet bomber and reconnaissance aircraft, and as such it demonstrated the future direction of aerial warfare. Its design philosophy, speed, and altitude as primary means of defense anticipated the doctrines that would dominate bomber development in the early Cold War. Operationally, the R234 showed that jet propulsion could give aircraft a decisive advantage in survivability. Allied fighter pilots reported frustration at their inability to intercept the Blitz during reconnaissance missions. This single fact had long-lasting consequences. It proved that propeller-driven interceptors were no longer adequate to defend against advanced bombers, accelerating the Allied push to field jet fighters such as the Gloucester Meteor and the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star. In this sense, the R-234 indirectly shaped post-war air defense strategies on both sides of the Atlantic. Captured examples of the R-234 were transported to the United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union after the war, where they were carefully studied and test-flown. The British Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough evaluated an R-234B, while the Americans transferred captured examples to Wright Field. Engineers examined everything from engine installation to cockpit layout, gaining insights that influenced their own jet bomber programs. While no direct copy was made, the emphasis on speed, aerodynamic streamlining, and all-jet propulsion found echoes in designs such as the English Electric Canberra and the Martin B-57, both of which prioritize speed and high-altitude performance over defensive armament. For the Soviet Union, which also received captured R-234S, the aircraft provided valuable lessons in jet bomber design and operational philosophy. Soviet engineers combined German research with their own developments to accelerate projects such as the Ilyushin Il-28, a jet bomber that bore conceptual similarities in its use of speed and altitude to avoid interception. Thus, while the Blitz did not shape post-war aircraft directly through licensed production, it left a clear imprint on the evolution of early Cold War bomber fleets. Culturally and historically, the R-234 stands as one of the most advanced examples of Germany's late-war Wunderwaffen programs. Unlike many paper projects or prototypes that never left the drawing board, the Blitz saw operational service and achieved real results in reconnaissance and bombing missions. It proved that jet bombers were not only possible but practical, even under the extreme pressures of wartime collapse. This fact alone distinguished it from other experimental German designs that remained largely theoretical. Today, only two Arado R-234S survive, both preserved in museums. One resides at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., while the other is displayed at the Royal Air Force Museum in Cosford, United Kingdom. Both are significant artifacts representing the dawn of jet-powered bomber aviation. Their preservation ensures that the Blitz is remembered not merely as a desperate late-war weapon, but as a technological milestone that pointed the way toward the jet age. In evaluating its legacy, the R-234's limitations must also be acknowledged. Its engines were unreliable and short-lived, its bomb load relatively light, and its impact on the war negligible given the scale of Allied dominance. Yet its achievements were undeniable. It was the first operational aircraft of its kind, and it demonstrated capabilities that would become essential to post-war military aviation. The Blitz remains a symbol of how necessity can drive innovation and how even weapons introduced too late to influence their own conflict can shape those that follow. Its short service life belied its long-lasting influence, and in the history of aviation, it endures as the first jet bomber to fly in combat, opening the door to an entirely new era of strategic and tactical air power. Beyond its better-known combat record, the Arado R-234 Blitz also participated in several lesser-known missions and experimental adaptations that underline its importance as both a combat aircraft and a test platform. These chapters, often overlooked in conventional histories, reveal the degree to which German engineers and Luftwaffe planners attempted to stretch the potential of the world's first jet bomber under increasingly desperate circumstances. One of the most significant unseen uses of the R-234 was its role in advanced reconnaissance. While reconnaissance variants such as the R-234B1 are well documented, certain missions went deeper into strategic intelligence. Blitz aircraft photographed Allied beachheads in Normandy, the port of Antwerp, and even airfields deep inside occupied France and the Low Countries. On several occasions, R-234S were dispatched to monitor Allied bomber streams forming over Britain before crossing the Channel, providing near real-time intelligence to German command. These flights were often unacknowledged in official records, but they demonstrated how jet speed gave Germany a fleeting ability to pierce the Allies' air superiority. Another little-known aspect of the R-234's service was its experimental adaptation as a night fighter. Several prototypes of the R-234B were modified with Fuji-218 Neptune radar and heavy forward-firing cannon intended to intercept RAF night bombers. These R-234P variants added a second crew member to operate the radar, but the combination of limited availability, unreliable engines, and inadequate firepower meant the concept never became operational. Still, the project foreshadowed the role of jet-powered interceptors that would dominate the skies within a decade. The R-234 was also linked to early attempts at combined weapon systems. Engineers explored the possibility of using the aircraft as a launch platform for guided munitions, including the Fritz X precision bomb and H's 293 glide bomb. While records suggest trials were initiated, the practical difficulties of mounting and deploying such weapons from a jet bomber combined with resource shortages prevented their operational use. Nevertheless, these concepts demonstrated that German planners recognized the potential of combining jet speed with standoff precision weapons, an idea that would reappear in post-war missile and bomber integration. One of the most striking experimental uses of the Blitz was in testing rocket-assisted takeoff systems. Given the limited thrust of early jet engines, R-234s were equipped with Walter HWK-109, 500 Starthill rocket pods attached under the wings. These pods provided extra thrust during takeoff and were jettisoned once airborne. While primarily a practical solution to short runway problems, they also pointed toward future concepts of mixed propulsion in combat aircraft. Veteran accounts from R-234 pilots further illuminate lesser-known aspects of the aircraft's use. Crews described how reconnaissance missions often required solitary flights of hundreds of kilometers at high altitude, relying on the aircraft's speed as the only protection. Some recalled the unnerving sensation of being the sole aircraft in the sky, passing above Allied formations without fear of interception. Others mentioned the challenges of operating advanced instruments alone in the cockpit, a workload that strained even the most skilled aviators. After Germany's surrender, captured R-234s were quickly appropriated by Allied technical teams. The United States, Britain, and the Soviet Union each evaluated examples, and while none entered foreign service, their influence extended into research programs. The RAF in particular noted the aircraft's suitability for high-speed reconnaissance, a concept that directly informed early post-war jet designs. American engineers drew lessons from its engine placement and aerodynamic streamlining, while Soviet teams studied its use of lightweight construction and pressurized cockpits. The final, unseen chapter of the R-234 lies in its symbolic role as part of the Luftwaffe's last wave of advanced weapons. Alongside the Me-262 jet fighter and the Heinkel He-162 Volksjäger, the Blitz represented Germany's attempt to regain technological dominance through innovation. While ultimately too late to change the outcome, these efforts laid the groundwork for the jet-dominated air forces of the post-war world. In summary, the R-234's hidden history extends beyond its better-known bombing raids and reconnaissance sorties. It was an aircraft that served simultaneously as an operational weapon, a reconnaissance platform, and a testbed for concepts that anticipated the future of aviation. Though its numbers were small and its impact limited, the Blitz's lesser-known missions and experiments reveal it as not just the world's first jet bomber, but also a harbinger of the doctrines and technologies that defined the early Cold War. By the war's end, the Arado R-234 Blitz had already secured its place as a technological milestone, but its legacy unfolded more fully in the post-war years, when captured examples and engineering data directly influenced the shape of Cold War aviation. Although fewer than 300 were built and only a fraction reached operational units, the aircraft's advanced design demonstrated concepts that would dominate bomber and reconnaissance development for decades. The Allies, recognizing its importance, immediately transported captured R-234s to test centers. In Britain, one example was flown at Farnborough, where engineers analyzed its performance and cockpit systems. British test pilots noted the aircraft's speed and smooth handling, as well as its advanced autopilot and bombsight integration, features that highlighted how much emphasis the Germans had placed on single-pilot operation. In the United States, R-234s were evaluated at Wright Field, where the focus was on jet propulsion efficiency, wing design, and fuel systems. Soviet engineers also examined several captured aircraft, comparing them with their own early jet prototypes. Across all three powers, the Blitz served as a valuable data point in the transition to jet-powered strategic and tactical aircraft. The aircraft's most immediate influence was in reconnaissance doctrine. The R-234 had proven the value of a high-speed, high-altitude reconnaissance jet that could penetrate defended airspace without escort. This concept was adopted directly into early post-war designs such as the British English Electric Canberra and its American derivative, the Martin B-57. Both emphasized speed and altitude over defensive armament, a philosophy that was pioneered by the Blitz. In this respect, the R-234 provided a template for the jet reconnaissance aircraft that played crucial roles during the Cold War. In terms of bomber development, the Blitz demonstrated that defensive gun turrets were becoming obsolete in the face of jet speed. Post-war strategic bombers, from the B-47 Stratojet to the Soviet Tu-16, adopted clean, aerodynamic designs without the heavy defensive armament that had characterized the bombers of World War II. Instead, survivability depended on altitude, electronic countermeasures, and eventually nuclear standoff weapons. The AR-234 was an early proof of concept for this shift in philosophy. Despite its pioneering nature, the R-234's legacy also reflected its shortcomings. Its engines were unreliable, with extremely short lifespans, and its payload capacity was too limited to serve as a true strategic bomber. Yet even in these limitations lay lessons. Allied engineers studying the Jumo 004 turbojet identified areas for improvement in metallurgy, cooling, and fuel consumption that informed subsequent generations of jet engines. The aircraft's small bomb load emphasized the need for more powerful propulsion systems and larger airframes if jet bombers were to replace piston-engine-heavy bombers. These insights accelerated the transition to larger, more capable platforms such as the Boeing B-47 and the Soviet Ilyushin Il-28. Today, the R-234 is remembered as both a technical achievement and a symbol of Germany's late-war desperation. Its sleek design and pioneering use of jet propulsion make it one of the most significant aircraft of the Second World War, even if its operational impact was limited. Only two examples survive, one at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in the United States, and the other at the RAF Museum in Cosford, England. These surviving airframes are rare reminders of the dawn of the jet bomber era, preserved to illustrate the leap in technology that occurred in the war's final years. Ultimately, the R-234 Blitz represents the moment when bomber aviation crossed into the jet age. It was an aircraft conceived too late to change Germany's fate, but not too late to influence the future. Its speed, design philosophy, and reconnaissance capabilities shaped the thinking of post-war air forces and set the stage for a new generation of jet-powered bombers and surveillance aircraft. In this sense, the Blitz remains more than just a footnote in aviation history. It was the forerunner of modern jet bombers, a machine that bridged the gap between the piston-powered giants of the Second World War and the streamlined nuclear-era bombers of the Cold War. The closing chapter of the Arado R-234 Blitz's story highlights its role as both a technological pioneer and a weapon that was ultimately too late and too limited to alter the outcome of the war. Its operational record, while brief, showcased the potential of jet propulsion for bombing and reconnaissance missions, but it also exposed the challenges of introducing such radical technology under wartime conditions. In the end, the Blitz's importance lies less in the tactical results it achieved for Germany and more in the strategic lessons it offered to the future of aviation. During its final months of service in early 1945, the R-234 continued to fly reconnaissance and strike missions even as the Reich collapsed around it. Units like Kampfgeschwader 76 operated from shrinking airfields, often under constant Allied attack, and struggled with fuel shortages, maintenance difficulties, and spare part scarcity. While the Blitz could still outrun most Allied fighters once airborne, many were destroyed on the ground by bombing raids before they could take off. Those that did fly performed valuable but ultimately futile missions, photographing advancing Allied armies, bombing bridges and supply lines, and attempting to slow an unstoppable tide. By April 1945, only a handful remained operational. The aircraft's limitations became increasingly apparent. With a maximum bomb load of 1.5 tons, the R-234 could not deliver the kind of strategic destruction that Allied heavy bombers inflicted daily on Germany. Its engines, though revolutionary, were fragile and required replacement after only a few dozen hours of use. The absence of defensive armament underscored its reliance on speed, but it also made the jet vulnerable during takeoff and landing. In practical terms, the Blitz was a weapon of promise rather than a decisive instrument of war. Yet in the broader view, its legacy far outweighed its combat record. The R-234 introduced concepts that defined the next era of aviation: speed and altitude as substitutes for heavy armament, streamlined aerodynamics for efficiency, and jet propulsion as the foundation of bomber and reconnaissance design. Its influence could be seen in post-war aircraft like the British Canberra, the American B-57, and the Soviet Il-28, all of which carried forward the Blitz's philosophy of using velocity as defense. The aircraft also left a cultural and symbolic imprint. Within the Luftwaffe, it was seen as one of the last expressions of German technological ingenuity, arriving at a time when the Reich was otherwise in retreat. To Allied air crews who encountered it, the Blitz was a startling sight, a bomber that flew faster than their fighters, heralding a future in which jet-powered adversaries would dominate the skies. Historians later regarded it as a harbinger of the Cold War arms race, a weapon that showed what was possible even as it failed to achieve meaningful results in its own war. Only 2 Arado R-234s survive today, preserved in museums as rare artifacts of aviation history. Visitors who stand beneath their sleek fuselages see not just the world's first jet bomber, but the embodiment of an inflection point in technology. The moment piston power gave way to jet propulsion, and the doctrines of World War II yielded to the strategies of the nuclear age. In the end, the R-234 Blitz was both a success and a failure. It succeeded in proving that jet bombers were practical, in setting design principles that would guide future generations, and in providing Germany with a reconnaissance platform unmatched by the Allies in 1944-45. But it failed to arrive in numbers sufficient to affect the war, constrained by industrial collapse, fuel shortages, and the immaturity of its engines. Its story is thus one of innovation born too late, a weapon of extraordinary potential that pointed unmistakably toward the future, even as it disappeared in the ruins of the Third Reich. By the close of the war in May 1945, the Arado R-234 Blitz had already transitioned from a cutting-edge combat aircraft to a technological prize sought eagerly by the victors. As Allied forces advanced across Germany, examples of the jet bomber were captured intact, crated, and shipped abroad for evaluation. In this way, the Blitz lived a second life, not in combat, but as an influence on the development of post-war aviation across multiple nations. In the United States, captured R-234s were taken to Wright Field, where they were extensively tested under the Operation Lusty program. American engineers and pilots examined the jet's aerodynamics, engine configuration, and cockpit instrumentation. While the fragile Junkers Jumo 004 engines limited prolonged testing, the aircraft's streamlined airframe and autopilot integration were of particular interest. The lessons learned contributed indirectly to early jet bomber designs and reinforced the idea that high speed and clean design, not heavy defensive armament, were the future of strategic aviation. Britain also evaluated several captured R-234s. At Farnborough, Royal Air Force test pilots flew the Blitz to study its handling characteristics. British engineers paid close attention to its camera installations and reconnaissance equipment, which confirmed that the aircraft was far ahead of anything the Allies had fielded for high-speed intelligence gathering. These insights directly influenced the development of the English electric Canberra, the first jet bomber to enter RAF service, which, like the R-234, emphasized speed, altitude, and precision. The Soviet Union likewise gained access to several R-234s, either through direct capture or through the transfer of German technology after the war. While the Soviets were already pursuing indigenous jet projects, analysis of the Blitz provided useful confirmation of design choices, particularly in reconnaissance layouts and streamlined construction. The Ilyushin Il-28, which emerged in the late 1940s, shared conceptual similarities with the R-234 in its emphasis on speed and efficiency as defensive measures. Despite these influences, the R-234's post-war role was primarily symbolic. With only 2 surviving examples today, one at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C., and another at the Royal Air Force Museum in Cosford, England, the Blitz stands as a rare artifact of the transition from piston to jet power in bomber design. These preserved aircraft remind us not of great fleets or decisive battles, but of how a handful of machines can signal the arrival of a new technological epoch. The ultimate legacy of the Arado R-234 lies in its demonstration that jet propulsion could revolutionize bombing and reconnaissance. It proved that speed and altitude were more effective than turrets and gunners, that advanced autopilot and bombsight systems could allow single-pilot operation, and that reconnaissance jets could provide intelligence with unprecedented safety and precision. Its impact on the war was negligible, but its impact on the future of aviation was profound. In conclusion, the R-234 Blitz was a weapon ahead of its time, a technological breakthrough deployed in numbers too small to influence Germany's fate. Yet by existing, by flying real missions, and by being examined by the victors, it bridged the gap between the bomber fleets of the Second World War and the sleek, jet-powered aircraft of the Cold War. The world's first operational jet bomber remains one of the clearest examples of how innovation can arise even in desperation, and how the seeds of tomorrow's doctrine can be sown in the twilight of a lost war.